You are listening to HOA Spot. The HOA tried to bury the records. You can appeal after I file it. That is what Gloria said, waving a stack of printed photos at my face while I stood on my own driveway, holding the evidence binder that documented everything. Karen yelled that my evidence binder was intimidation and she would have security remove me. I kept the binder open to the page that showed her signature on the original cure acknowledgement, the one she claimed never existed. I am a plumber in Madison, Wisconsin, and I work long hours fixing burst pipes and corroded water heaters, which means I do not have time for HOA theatrics. But Beacon Hill HOA Incorporated does not care about my schedule. Gloria Evans, the rules interpretation chair who claims she wrote the covenants herself, showed up at my house 3 weeks ago with a file cart and announced she had a thick history on my address. She said the HOA was reopening a case from 2 years back, a towing incident that was never resolved, and now they were tying it to a new violation to justify a reinspection fee and a lien threat. The stakes were immediate and brutal. I have a strict lease addendum tied to the HOA, and they were trying to create a violation record that would trigger default clauses and kill my ability to refinance. Gloria planted her feet on my driveway and smiled that cold, administrative smile. Smile, I am documenting this for the file. She said it like she was reading me my rights. A teen on a bike braking hard to watch the argument roll to a stop at the curb, 1 foot on the pavement, staring at the scene. Gloria did not care. She turned and aimed her flashlight at the kid, holding it like a spotlight, and the kid took off. The immediate problem was a landscaping compliance issue. 2 months ago, the HOA sent a notice saying my front hedge was too tall. I trimmed it the same week and submitted photos with a cure letter. The HOA acknowledged receipt. Then nothing. Until 3 weeks ago, when Gloria showed up with her file cart and said the hedge was still in violation and the original cure was never accepted because I used the wrong form. She handed me a new notice with a 14-day deadline and a $200 reinspection fee. When I pointed out that I already cured it and had proof, she said the proof was not in the file and I needed to resubmit everything in the new format. She gave me a laminated sheet with the new requirements. The sheet was printed 2 days before she delivered the notice. That was when I realized this was not about the hedge. This was about the old case, the one from 2 years ago that vanished from the meeting minutes after it became a scandal. A neighbor named Paul had his truck towed from his own driveway in the middle of the night. The tow company claimed the HOA authorized it. The HOA claimed they never did. Paul fought it for months, racked up storage fees, and eventually sold the truck at a loss just to stop the bleeding. The case disappeared from the records after 1 meeting, and no one ever explained why. I had been new to the neighborhood then and did not pay much attention, but now Gloria was using a preferred vendor to create fake urgency and invented reinspection fees, and I was starting to see a pattern. I opened the evidence binder on the hood of my truck and showed Gloria the acknowledgement letter. She glanced at it and said it was not notarized. I said the rules do not require notarization for cure letters. She said they do now. That is when she dropped the line that would come back to haunt her. We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works. She said it with a smirk, tapping her clipboard with a clear rain cover against her palm. The clipboard had a stack of blank violation notices underneath the rain cover, ready to print and distribute. I let her think I was cornered because my trump card needed her to overreach. I had already started investigating the cold case. I pulled the archived meeting minutes from the city clerk portal and found something strange. The meeting where Paul's tow was discussed had 2 versions. The first version, uploaded in real time, included a full discussion and a vote to reverse the tow and refund Paul's fees. The second version, uploaded 3 weeks later, had that entire section deleted and replaced with a note that said the matter was referred to executive session. I took screenshots of both versions, including the metadata showing the upload timestamps. That was my first clue. The second clue came from Paul himself. I tracked him down through a neighborhood Facebook group and called him. He still had the tow paperwork and the original notice. The notice had a signature at the bottom that he swore was not there when he first received it. He scanned it and sent it to me. I compared the signature to other HOA documents I had collected. The ink color was different and the pen pressure was lighter, like someone had added it later with a different pen. Paul also told me that Gloria had cornered him in the clubhouse parking lot a week after the meeting and told him the board would make it right if he dropped the complaint. He dropped it. Nothing happened. The third clue was in the vendor records. The HOA uses a property management company called Beacon Services to coordinate maintenance and enforcement. I filed a records request for all vendor correspondence related to towing and re-inspections over the past 3 years. It took 2 weeks, but they sent me a PDF packet. Buried in the emails was a thread between Gloria and the tow company owner, a guy named Rick. Gloria had asked Rick to change the date on a dispatch log to match a board resolution that had not been passed yet. Rick said he could not do that. Gloria replied that she would find another vendor who understood compliance priorities. 2 months later, the HOA switched tow companies. The new company, Iron Gate Towing, had no problem with flexible dispatch logs. That was the smoking gun. I kept all of this quiet while I complied with Gloria's new reinspection demand. I trimmed the hedge again, measured it with a tape measure, took photos with a timestamp overlay app, and submitted everything in the new format she required. I hand-delivered the packet to the management office and got a stamped receipt. Gloria called me the next day and said the photos were not acceptable because they did not show the property line markers. I said the rules do not require property line markers in landscaping photos. She said they do now. I asked her to show me where. She said it was in the updated guidelines, which were not published yet, but would be available after the next board meeting. The board meeting was 3 weeks away. My reinspection deadline was in 6 days. That was escalation step 1. A demand for proof in a format they never mentioned until today. I documented the call, added her statements to my binder, and went back to the cold case. I needed to connect Gloria directly to the scheme, not just the vendor. I started looking at the financial records. HOA budgets are public in Wisconsin, so I filed another request for the past 3 years of ledgers and invoices. What I found was a pattern. Every time a reinspection fee was charged, the HOA paid Iron Gate Towing a consultation fee within the same billing cycle. The consultation fees were always slightly less than the reinspection fees, but the timing was too consistent to be coincidence. Someone was kicking money back to the vendor in exchange for manufactured urgency. I reached out to my ally, a city code enforcement officer named Marcus, who I had worked with on a commercial plumbing job last year. Marcus knew the HOA game and had no patience for power-tripping volunteers. I showed him the screenshots, the vendor emails, and the ledger pattern. He looked at it for about 10 seconds and said Gloria was running a classic skim. The HOA was not stealing huge amounts, just enough to stay under the audit threshold, and the vendor was splitting the take. Marcus said it was technically fraud, but proving intent was hard unless I could get Gloria to admit coordination on the record. He suggested I bait her into a public confrontation where she would overreach and create more evidence. I did not have to wait long. 5 days before my reinspection deadline, Gloria showed up at my house again. this time with a guy in an iron gate towing polo shirt and a handheld radio clipped to his belt. She said she was conducting a preliminary inspection and needed access to my backyard to verify compliance with the side yard setback rules. I said the violation notice was about the front hedge, not the side yard. She said the reinspection included all exterior landscaping, and if I refused access, she would note it as obstruction and proceed with a lien. The tow driver stood behind her with his arms crossed, not saying anything, just being large and present. That was escalation step 2. A trespass onto my property with backup to try to bait a reaction on camera. Gloria had her phone out, recording. I stayed calm, kept my hands visible, and said I would allow the inspection if she provided written documentation of the expanded scope and the rule citation. She said she did not need to provide anything. This was her authority as compliance chair. I said I was not refusing. I was requesting documentation, which is my right under the bylaws. The tow driver shifted his weight and looked uncomfortable. Gloria snapped at him to stay put and then turned back to me. She said if I wanted documentation, I could file a formal appeal, but the appeal process required a $50 fee and would not stop the lien. I said I would pay the fee. She said the appeal had to be submitted in person at the management office during business hours, which closed in 20 minutes, and the office was a 30-minute drive away. A neighbor across the street, an older woman named Diane, came out of her house and stood on her porch, watching. Gloria saw her and raised her voice. "Smile, I am documenting this for the file." She said it again, louder, like she was performing for an audience. Diane called out and asked if everything was okay. I said everything was fine, just an HOA inspection. Gloria turned and told Diane to go back inside. This was official business. Diane did not move. The tow driver looked at Gloria and said he needed to get back to the yard. He had other calls. Gloria told him to wait. He said he was not paid to stand around. He walked back to his truck and left. Gloria spun back to me and said I had just witnessed obstruction by a contracted vendor, and she was adding that to my file. I said the driver left on his own. I did not obstruct anything. She said my attitude was obstruction. Then she got back in her car and drove away, but not before stopping at the curb and using her handheld label maker to print something and stick it to my mailbox post. I walked over after she left. The label said inspection refused with today's date. I peeled it off, bagged it, and added it to the binder. That night, I got a call from Paul. He said Gloria had reached out to him through a mutual contact and asked him to sign a statement saying he had been satisfied with the HOA's resolution of his tow case. Paul said he told her no. She said it was just a formality for the records. He said he did not care, he was not signing anything. Then he called me and said I needed to be careful because Gloria was trying to clean up loose ends. That was my side complication. A witness changes their story after Karen corners them in private. Paul did not change his story, but Gloria tried, and that told me she knew I was digging. I filed the appeal the next morning. The management office receptionist, a young guy named Kyle, took my $50 check and gave me a receipt. He said the appeal would be reviewed at the next board meeting, and I would be notified of the decision by mail. I asked if I could get a copy of the updated landscaping guidelines Gloria mentioned. Kyle looked confused. He said there were no updated guidelines scheduled for publication. I showed him the notes from my call with Gloria. He said he did not know anything about that, and I should talk to the board president. I asked who that was. He said it was Gloria. The timeline was collapsing. The reinspection deadline was in 2 days. I had a neighbor who offered to testify but could only make it tonight before travel plans. Diane agreed to come to my house and give a recorded statement about what she saw during the backyard inspection confrontation. She showed up at 6, sat in my living room, and told me everything. She said Gloria had been pressuring neighbors for months, always showing up with her clipboard and her label maker, always threatening liens and towing. Diane said she had seen Gloria at the community entrance sign area late at night 3 times in the past month, standing under the light with her phone, looking at something. Diane did not know what, but it seemed weird. I recorded the whole conversation on my phone, got Diane's signature on a witness affidavit, and added it to the binder. The next morning, I got a certified letter from the HOA attorney. It said my appeal had been reviewed and denied because I failed to attend a mandatory pre-hearing conference that was scheduled for yesterday at 10 in the morning. I had never been notified of any pre-hearing conference. I called the management office. Kyle said he did not know anything about a pre-hearing conference and it was not on the calendar. I asked if he could check the email logs. He put me on hold, came back, and said there was no record of any notification being sent to me. I asked him to document that in writing. He said he could not do that without approval from the board president. I said the board president was the one lying. Kyle went quiet. Then he said he would see what he could do and hung up. That was when I realized the HOA was backdating notices to manufacture late fees. The certified letter had a postmark from 4 days ago, but the conference it referenced was supposedly yesterday, which meant the letter was sent after the conference date had already passed. Someone was playing games with the mail. I took photos of the envelope, the postmark, and the letter content and added them to the binder. Then I called Marcus. He said I had enough to file a complaint with the state AG office for HOA fraud, but it would take months to investigate and I needed to stop the immediate lien threat first. He said the fastest way was to force a public confrontation at a board meeting and get Gloria to contradict herself on the record. The next board meeting was in 5 days. My reinspection deadline was tomorrow. I decided to go to the tow yard and talk to Rick, the original tow company owner who refused to backdate the dispatch logs. Iron Gate Towing had a small office near the interstate. I drove over and found Rick in the garage bay, pulling a transmission. I introduced myself and asked if he remembered the Beacon Hill HOA account. He wiped his hands on a rag and said he remembered. I asked why he stopped working with them. He said Gloria wanted him to falsify records and he was not doing that. I asked if he would be willing to testify. He said he did not want trouble. I said Gloria was still doing it with the new vendor and it was hurting homeowners. He said that was not his problem. I showed him the email thread where Gloria threatened to find another vendor. He read it and his face changed. He said she told people he lost the contract because of poor service. I said she lied. He said he would think about it. That afternoon, the HOA sent a tow truck to my driveway. I was inside working on an invoice when I heard the diesel engine. I looked out the window and saw an Iron Gate truck backing up to my work truck. I ran outside. The driver, a different guy this time, said he had authorization to remove an unregistered vehicle from the property. I said my truck was registered and parked legally in my own driveway. He showed me a dispatch log on his phone. It said the vehicle had been reported as abandoned by the HOA compliance officer. The report was dated today, 10 minutes ago. I said that was impossible. I was standing right here. He shrugged and said he was just doing his job. I asked to see the signed authorization. He said it was electronic. I asked him to call his dispatcher. He said he did not have to do that. Then he started hooking up the truck. I pulled out my phone and called Gloria. She answered on the second ring. I said there was a tow truck in my driveway trying to take my vehicle, and I needed her to call it off. She said the vehicle was in violation of parking rules and the tow was authorized. I said I was standing in my own driveway and the truck was registered and insured. She said the rules required all vehicles to display an HOA parking permit, and my truck did not have one. I said there was no such rule. She said it was in the updated covenants. I said the covenants had not been updated in 3 years. She said I could appeal the tow after it was completed. I said that was exactly what she said to Paul 2 years ago, and I had proof. There was a pause. Then Gloria said, "Smile, I am documenting this for the file," and hung up. I turned to the tow driver and said I was not moving, and he could either unhook the truck or call the police. He said he was not calling the police. A patrol car turned onto the street. Diane had called them. The deputy got out, looked at the scene, and asked what was going on. The tow driver said he had a dispatch order. I said the HOA was fraudulently authorizing tows. The deputy asked to see the authorization. The driver showed him the phone screen. The deputy looked at it and said the authorization did not have a signature or a case number. He asked the driver if he had spoken to the property owner before hooking up. The driver said no. The deputy told him to unhook the vehicle and leave. The driver argued. The deputy said it again, slower. The driver unhooked and left. The deputy asked if I wanted to file a report. I said yes. He took my statement, looked at the binder, and said this looked like a civil dispute, but the tow attempt without proper authorization was potentially criminal. He said he would file the report and I should bring everything to the county attorney. I thanked him, and he left. Diane came over and said she was glad I was okay. She said Gloria had been parked at the end of the street watching the whole thing. I looked. Gloria's car was gone. That night, I sat down and mapped out everything I had. Screenshots of the doctored meeting minutes, the vendor email thread, the ledger pattern, Paul's original tow paperwork with the added signature, the certified letter with the impossible postmark, the recorded witness statement from Diane, the police report from today, and my trump card, which I had been holding close, a chain of certified letters proving the HOA received my cure and fined me anyway. I had sent the original cure letter, certified mail, with a tracking number and a signed delivery receipt. The receipt was signed by Kyle at the management office. The HOA claimed they never received it. But I had the tracking history, the signature, and the timestamp. That was the piece that would prove intent. I spent the next 3 days organizing the binder into a presentation. I made a timeline on poster board with each incident marked and color-coded. I printed copies of every key document and put them in sheet protectors. I rehearsed the presentation in my living room until I could deliver it in under 10 minutes. Marcus came by and looked at it. He said it was solid, but I needed to stay calm and let the evidence do the work. He said boards hate confrontation, and if I gave them an easy way out, they would take it. He said my goal was not to destroy Gloria in the meeting, it was to force the board to investigate and let the investigation destroy her. The board meeting was held at the clubhouse on a Thursday night. The meeting started at 7. I got there at 6:30 and sat in the back row. The room filled up fast. A lot of neighbors showed up, more than usual, because word had spread that there was going to be drama. Gloria sat at the front table with 4 other board members, her clipboard in front of her, her label maker clipped to her belt. She saw me and smiled. Smile, I am documenting this for the file. She mouthed it silently. The meeting started with routine business. Budget line items, landscaping bids, a complaint about holiday decorations. 40 minutes in, they got to new business. The board president, a retired accountant named Ed, asked if anyone had items to raise. I stood up and said I had an appeal to present. Ed said appeals had to be submitted in writing. I said I did submit in writing and paid the fee, and my appeal was denied without a hearing. Ed looked at Gloria. Gloria said my appeal was reviewed and the decision was final. I said I was never notified of the pre-hearing conference. Gloria said notification was sent. I said the management office confirmed no notification was sent. Kyle, who was sitting in the corner taking notes, looked up and then looked down. If you are enjoying this wild ride, smash that like button and subscribe, because this is about to get even better. Ed said this was turning into a dispute and he was not going to litigate it in the meeting. I said I was not asking him to litigate, I was asking him to review evidence of systematic fraud. The room went quiet. Gloria stood up and said I was out of order. I said I had documentation. She said documentation was not relevant to the appeal. I opened the binder and held it up. Ed said he was not going to review a binder during the meeting. I said the binder contained proof that the HOA had been backdating notices, coordinating with vendors to manufacture violations, and doctoring meeting minutes to cover it up. Gloria said that was a lie. I said I had screenshots, emails, and witness statements. Ed said if I had evidence of wrongdoing, I should submit it to the HOA attorney. I said the HOA attorney sent me a backdated letter. I held up the envelope with the postmark. A board member named Susan, who handled compliance appeals, asked to see the envelope. Ed said no. Susan said she wanted to see it. Ed said it was not appropriate. Susan stood up and walked over to me. I handed her the envelope. She looked at the postmark, looked at the letter inside, and looked at Ed. She said, "This does not make sense." Ed said it was probably a post office error. I said the post office does not backdate mail. Susan asked Kyle when the pre-hearing conference was scheduled. Kyle said it was not on the calendar. Susan asked Gloria when she scheduled it. Gloria said it was an informal conference and it did not need to be on the calendar. Susan said that was not how appeals work. That was the moment it started to crack. Susan asked to see the binder. Ed said no. Susan said she was on the board and she had a right to review evidence. Ed said the meeting was not the place. Susan said if there was fraud happening, the board needed to know. She looked at Gloria. Gloria said there was no fraud. This was a disgruntled homeowner trying to avoid a fine. Susan said she wanted to see the vendor coordination emails. I pulled the packet from the binder and handed it to her. She sat down and started reading. The room was completely silent. Ed tried to move to the next agenda item. Susan said, "Wait." She kept reading. Then she looked up at Gloria and said, "Did you ask a vendor to change a dispatch log date?" Gloria said the email was taken out of context. Susan said the context was very clear. Gloria said I was harassing her and she was filing a complaint with the sheriff. Susan said Gloria was deflecting and the board needed to investigate. Ed said they would discuss it in executive session. Susan said this was not an executive session matter. This was public record fraud. Ed said that was a serious accusation. Susan said she was looking at serious evidence. Another board member, a guy named Tom who handled landscape approvals, asked to see the ledger pattern. I pulled the financial summary and handed it over. Tom looked at it for 30 seconds and said, "Why are we paying consultation fees to a tow company?" Ed said it was for compliance coordination. Tom said, "We do not coordinate with tow companies. We authorize tows through management." Ed said it was a vendor relations expense. Tom said it was not in the approved budget. Ed said it was covered under discretionary spending. Tom said discretionary spending required board approval for amounts over $100, and these were monthly fees. Ed went quiet. Gloria stood up and said this was turning into a witch hunt, and she was not going to sit here and be accused. Susan said no one was accusing her of anything yet. We are just reviewing documents. Gloria said the documents were fabricated. I said they came from the HOA's own records request. Gloria said I had doctored them. I said I had the original PDF files with metadata showing they came from the management company server. Kyle cleared his throat and said the files were authentic. He pulled them himself. Gloria turned and stared at him. Kyle did not look up. Ed said the board would take the matter under advisement and schedule a special session to review the evidence. Susan said no, we are reviewing it now. Ed said that was not proper procedure. Susan said covering up fraud was not proper procedure either. Tom said he agreed with Susan. Another board member, a woman named Linda, who rarely spoke, said she wanted to see the meeting minutes screenshots. I pulled them and handed them over. Linda looked at them and said, "These are two different versions." I said yes. She said, "Why would we have two versions?" Ed said sometimes minutes are corrected after publication. Linda said the second version deleted an entire discussion and vote. Ed said he did not recall that meeting. Linda said it was 2 years ago. Ed said exactly, it was a long time ago. Linda said, but we have the original version right here, and it shows the board voted to reverse a tow and refund fees. And then the vote disappeared. Ed said he would have to check the archives. Gloria said this was ridiculous and she was leaving. Susan said if she left, it would look like an admission. Gloria said she did not care how it looked. She grabbed her clipboard and walked toward the door. Diane, who was sitting in the third row, stood up and said, "I saw you trying to tow his truck yesterday, and the police made your driver leave." Gloria stopped. She turned around and said Diane should mind her own business. Diane said it became my business when you told me to go back inside my house. Several neighbors murmured. Gloria said she was documenting harassment and stormed out. The meeting fell apart after that. Ed tried to close it. Susan said no, we need to vote on an internal audit. Tom said he seconded. Ed said they needed time to review the materials. Susan said they had enough to justify an audit right now. Linda said she agreed. Ed said he was calling for executive session. Susan said there was a motion on the floor and it required a vote. Ed said the motion was out of order. Susan said no, it was not. Robert's rules allow any board member to call for an audit when there is evidence of financial irregularities. Tom said he wanted a vote. Linda said she did too. Ed looked around the table. The fifth board member, an older man named Greg, who handled architectural approvals and had been silent the whole time, said, "I want to vote too." Ed called the vote. 4 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion passed. The board authorized an internal audit of all vendor contracts, compliance fines, and tow authorizations for the past 3 years. The room erupted in applause. I sat down. Marcus, who had been standing in the back, came over and said that was the best thing he had ever seen. I said it was not over. He said it was over for Gloria. The next morning, I got a call from the HOA attorney, a woman named Janet. She said the board had instructed her to investigate my claims and she needed to schedule an interview. I said I would bring my evidence. She said she had already received copies from Susan. I asked what the timeline was. She said she would have a preliminary report in 2 weeks. I asked what happened to my reinspection deadline. She said the deadline was suspended pending the investigation. I asked if the fine was suspended too. She said yes. I thanked her and hung up. 2 days later, Rick called me. He said he heard about the board meeting and he was willing to testify if needed. I said the investigation was underway and I would let him know. He said Gloria had called him that morning and asked him to sign a statement saying he left the HOA account because of a scheduling conflict. He said he told her no. She said it would help clear up misunderstandings. He said there was no misunderstanding. She tried to get him to commit fraud, and he refused. Then he hung up on her. I added the details to my notes and sent them to Janet. The investigation moved fast. Janet interviewed Kyle, who confirmed he had no record of a pre-hearing conference notification. She interviewed Paul, who provided his original tow paperwork, and told her about Gloria's offer to make it right if he dropped the complaint. She interviewed Diane, who gave a statement about the backyard inspection confrontation and the tow attempt. She interviewed Rick, who provided his original email thread with Gloria, and confirmed she asked him to backdate dispatch logs. She interviewed the Iron Gate Towing owner, who admitted Gloria had requested flexible logging for compliance efficiency, and he thought it was standard practice. When Janet explained it was fraud, he lawyered up. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Janet released her report. It was 23 pages. The summary concluded that Gloria had systematically abused her authority as compliance chair to generate reinspection fees, coordinate with vendors to create urgency, and manipulate records to cover discrepancies. The report found that Iron Gate Towing had received over $14,000 in consultation fees over 18 months, and those fees correlated directly with spikes in compliance violations. The report found that meeting minutes had been altered without board authorization, and the alterations concealed votes that contradicted Gloria's enforcement actions. The report found that at least 6 homeowners had been subjected to fraudulent violations, backdated notices, and improper tow authorizations. The report recommended immediate suspension of Gloria from all HOA duties, termination of the Iron Gate Towing contract, refunds to affected homeowners, and referral to the county attorney for potential criminal charges. The board held an emergency meeting to discuss the report. I was not required to attend, but I went anyway. The room was packed. Gloria did not show up. Ed read the report summary aloud. When he finished, Susan moved to accept all recommendations. Tom seconded. The vote was unanimous. Ed announced that Gloria was suspended effective immediately, and the board would hold a special election to fill her position. He also announced that the HOA would issue formal apologies and refunds to all affected homeowners, and a vendor termination that cuts off Karen's favorite enforcement muscle would be executed within 30 days. Linda asked if Gloria would be referred to the county attorney. Ed said yes. Greg asked if the HOA could recover the consultation fees from Iron Gate. Janet said she was pursuing that. Kyle raised his hand and said he had been instructed by Gloria on multiple occasions to delay or lose records requests, and he was glad it was finally being addressed. The room applauded again. A week later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a formal apology, a check for $400 covering my fine and appeal fee, and a signed statement from the board confirming my compliance with all covenants and releasing me from any further action. The statement was signed by all 5 board members, including Ed. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Susan. She said thank you for holding us accountable. The following month, the board held a special meeting to review new compliance policies. The policies required all violation notices to include rule citations, photographic evidence, and a clear cure process with fixed deadlines. The policies required all vendor authorizations to be logged in the public portal within 24 hours. The policies prohibited any board member from unilaterally authorizing enforcement actions. The policies required annual audits of all compliance fines and vendor contracts. The HOA votes to require actual evidence before fines. The motion passed unanimously. Gloria never came back. Her resignation letter arrived 2 days after the refund checks went out. She claimed health reasons. No one believed it. The county attorney opened an investigation, but I never heard how it ended. I assume she settled quietly. Iron Gate Towing lost the contract and filed for bankruptcy 6 months later. The owner claimed the HOA was his biggest client, and losing it destroyed his business. No sympathy from me. The special election to replace Gloria brought in a retired teacher named Angela, who had no interest in power trips. She ran on a platform of transparency and common sense. She won by a landslide. At her first meeting, she proposed eliminating the compliance chair position entirely and replacing it with a rotating compliance committee that required 3-member consensus for any enforcement action. The board approved it. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded with celebration. Paul reached out to me after the refunds went out. He said he got a check for $1,800, covering his original tow and storage fees plus interest. He said he wished he had fought harder 2 years ago, but he was grateful someone finally did. I told him it was not just me, it was everyone who spoke up. He said most people do not speak up, they just take it. I said that was why people like Gloria get away with it. Diane hosted a block party a month later to celebrate the new policies. Half the neighborhood showed up. People brought food, kids ran around, someone set up a speaker and played music. Angela came and gave a short speech about accountability and community. She thanked me publicly for starting the investigation and said the HOA was stronger because of it. People clapped. I felt embarrassed but also proud. Marcus showed up with his wife and said he had never seen an HOA case end that well. He said most of the time people just give up or move. I said I did not have the option to move, so I had to fight. The hedge is still trimmed, the truck is still in the driveway, the label maker is probably in a landfill somewhere. I kept the evidence binder on a shelf in my office just in case. I do not think I will need it again, but you never know. This is Beacon Hill now, not Beacon Hell. The fallout continued quietly over the next few months. The HOA attorney filed a civil suit against Iron Gate Towing to recover the consultation fees. The case settled for $11,000, which was distributed among the affected homeowners. I got another check for $700, which I put toward a new water heater. The HOA also renegotiated its management contract with Beacon Services to include stricter oversight and monthly compliance audits. Kyle got promoted to senior admin and a raise. He deserved it. The funniest part, the moment that still makes me laugh, happened at the first board meeting after the new policies took effect. Angela was reviewing a landscaping complaint someone had filed against a neighbor whose lawn had gotten overgrown during a family emergency. Gloria's old process would have been to issue a violation notice immediately and demand compliance within 7 days. Angela looked at the complaint, looked at the photos, and said, "This does not seem urgent. Let us send a courtesy letter and offer to help coordinate a lawn service if the homeowner needs it." The board approved it unanimously. A week later, the homeowner sent a thank you note saying the family emergency was resolved and the lawn was mowed. No fine, no drama, just neighbors helping neighbors. But the real karma moment, the one that felt like cosmic justice, came when the board reviewed Gloria's expense reports from her time as compliance chair. Buried in the receipts was a pattern of questionable reimbursements. Label maker cartridges, clipboard accessories, flashlight batteries, and multiple purchases of laminating sheets. The total was over $2,000 across 3 years. The board voted to demand repayment. Gloria's attorney responded with a letter claiming the expenses were legitimate compliance tools. Angela replied with a letter listing the specific HOA policy that prohibited personal equipment purchases without prior approval, and noted that Gloria, as the person who claimed she wrote the covenants, should have known that. Gloria's attorney went quiet. A settlement check arrived 2 weeks later. Karen is forced to retract her claim in writing. The board read it aloud at the next meeting, and the room erupted in laughter when Angela got to the part where Gloria acknowledged misunderstanding the reimbursement policy. Gloria's stopwatch and ruler routine gets mocked by the room, because everyone remembered how she used to walk the neighborhood with a tape measure and a timer, documenting every blade of grass and every second a car stayed parked. The cold case was closed, the fraud was exposed, the neighborhood was safer. I went back to fixing pipes and water heaters, and the HOA drama faded into the background where it belonged. Every now and then I see Angela at the mailbox cluster or the community entrance sign, and we exchange a nod. She is doing a good job. The compliance committee is working, the vendor contracts are clean, the meeting minutes are accurate. It is boring and functional, which is exactly what an HOA should be. I still keep the binder on the shelf. I still have Marcus on speed dial. I still take screenshots of every HOA email, just in case. But I do not think I will need them. The system works now because people are paying attention. That is the lesson. HOAs only become nightmares when no one is watching, when everyone assumes someone else is handling it, when people like Gloria can operate without oversight because nobody asks questions. I asked questions, I gathered evidence, I made them look, and it worked. Document everything, and I will see you soon.